All right, so welcome everyone to a deep dive back into Amazon's world in 2013.
Yeah, back in the day.
We're going to be looking at Jeff Bezos' letter to shareholders from that year. And,
These letters are
oh
fascinating.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
they're
not just numbers,
it's
it really gives you a window into how he was thinking back then.
a historical snapshot,
Right.
not only of financial performance, but
Yeah.
of Bezos's
And
vision
how Amazon operates, right?
at that particular
And
moment.
it's surprising how relevant it still is today.
Mm.
Now, to make things even more interesting, we also have this other source,
Okay.
which is someone who analyzed the letter and actually came up with discussion questions about it.
Oh, cool.
So we'll get into their take on things a little bit later on.
Awesome.
But first, let's rewind all the way back to 2013
All right.
and talk about something I bet you use all the time,
Okay.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Back then, they already had tens of millions of members, and they had over 20 million products that were eligible for their 2-day shipping.
Right.
Remember back then, they were like, oh, that's foolhardy.
Yeah, this crazy idea.
There's no way they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
But look at it now.
I know. It's just part of life.
It's so interesting to think about how revolutionary that seemed at the time.
It really shaped the entire e-commerce world, didn't it?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
set this new bar for what customers expected.
Right.
And really pushed other retailers to try and catch up.
And it wasn't just about speed either.
No.
Bezos was constantly adding more perks to Prime.
Mm-hmm.
Like they added the Kindle Owner's Lending Library and instant video.
Oh, right.
They were always looking for ways to add more value,
Yeah, even back then.
even back then.
Uh,
Now, speaking of Kindle, Bezos mentions this 4-year battle they had with the FAA just to get approval for people to use Kindles on planes.
really?
Do you imagine that?
That's wild.
Like trying to fly today and not being able to read your Kindle?
I know, right? It seems unthinkable now. It's crazy, right?
What I find interesting about that, though, is their persistence.
Yeah.
They really saw the potential of the Kindle from the very beginning,
Uh-huh.
and they were willing to really go the distance
Right.
to make sure customers had that smooth experience.
Yeah.
That long-term vision, I think, is really key to understanding Amazon.
And it paid off, right?
Right?
Kindle was going global. They were launching all these new publishing ventures.
Mhm.
And then there's Audible.
Oh, yeah.
Audible was just booming.
Gross.
600 million listening hours in that year alone.
Wow.
600 million. It's interesting how Bezos talks about being missionaries for reading.
Right, not just booksellers.
Uh-huh.
That's a cool distinction.
He really saw technology as this way to make reading more accessible and more engaging for everybody.
That's a perspective you don't hear often.
No.
People often talk about technology as a threat to reading,
Right.
but he sees it as a way to actually enhance it. Yeah, absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
2013 was a year of just huge experimentation for Amazon.
Okay.
They were expanding Amazon Fresh, but here's the thing.
What's that?
They'd already been piloting it in Seattle for 5 years before they even started taking it to other cities.
Oh, wow. 5 years.
5 years. Talk about patience, right?
Yeah, that's a prime example of their willingness to play the long game,
Right.
not rushing into things.
Uh-huh.
They gathered data, refined their model, and made sure they got it right
Mm-hmm.
before they even thought about scaling up.
Right.
And that's really different from that move fast and break things philosophy that a lot of tech companies have.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And meanwhile, you have AWS,
AWS,
which was just taken off.
taking the world by storm.
They were adding tons of services. They were slashing prices like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You can really see the seeds of what AWS is today,
Yeah, even back then.
even back in 2013.
It's amazing how early Bezos saw that potential in cloud computing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was already disrupting how companies thought about their IT infrastructure, and
Right.
it was just the beginning.
It was just the beginning. Talk about a game changer.
Absolutely.
They also launched Fire TV that year.
Oh, right.
And Bezos, he was super excited about the voice search feature.
Yeah, he talks about that in the letter.
He even tells this funny little story about their first Fire TV game.
Oh, really?
It was called Sev-Zero.
Okay.
It involved aliens and viruses.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just this little reminder that,
Mm-hmm.
amidst all the business talk,
Right.
there's still this sense of fun and passion.
It's good to see that side of things.
Yeah, I love that.
Oh,
Now, they were also introducing some other cool things back then,
like what?
like this feature called Ask an Owner.
Ask an owner, huh?
Basically, it was using the power of their customer review system
Right.
to answer questions about products directly.
Oh, That's smart.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, very clever.
It shows their commitment to really leveraging the knowledge of their customers,
Yeah, the collective wisdom.
which has always been a big part of their strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they were also making a big play in fashion at the time.
Oh, really?
They opened this massive photo studio
Wow.
in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn. Who knew fashion photography was happening in Brooklyn back then?
It's interesting how they were willing to invest in areas that were outside their traditional strength.
Yeah.
You know, they saw the potential in fashion,
Uh-huh.
and they were serious about building a presence there.
And they were really sweating the details, too.
What do you mean?
They were really pushing for this thing called frustration-free packaging.
Oh, right, trying to get rid of all that excess packaging.
Yeah, all the plastic, all the wire ties.
Yeah, it's the little things.
Right. By 2013, they'd already saved millions of pounds of packaging waste through that initiative.
That's impressive.
It's pretty amazing, right? It's those little things that can make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. It shows they were already thinking about sustainability.
Absolutely. Now, let's switch gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about Amazon's internal culture,
Right.
because this is where things get really fascinating.
I'm intrigued.
So they had this program called Career Choice,
Career choice.
and they would prepay 95% of tuition for their employees
Wow.
to take courses in any field,
Any field.
even if it had nothing to do with Amazon.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
It really shows their dedication to employee development,
Uh-huh.
and they recognize that not everyone stays at the same company forever.
Right.
They want to equip their employees with skills that are going to benefit them no matter where they go.
Yeah.
That's really forward-thinking.
It's incredible, right? And then they have this other thing. It's called pay to quit.
Pay to quit. What's that?
So once a year, they would offer employees money to quit.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
Wow.
It started at $2,000 and then went up to $5,000 over a few years.
That's so interesting.
It might sound counterintuitive, right?
It does, a little.
But it's actually a really clever way to make sure that people are really passionate about working at Amazon.
I see. So if someone's willing to take the money and leave,
Yeah.
it means they might not be fully engaged,
Right.
and they might be happier doing something else.
Exactly.
That's a bold move.
It is, and it really speaks volumes about their unique culture.
Yeah, for sure. They were also early adopters of remote work, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They were expanding their virtual contact center really rapidly.
Even back then,
Even back then.
they saw the potential of flexible work arrangements.
They were ahead of the curve, for sure.
Yeah, remote work was still pretty uncommon back in 2013,
Right.
but they recognized the benefits and they were willing to invest in it.
And clearly, that foresight has paid off.
Oh, yeah, given how mainstream remote work is now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were also actively hiring veterans at the time,
Okay.
recognizing
Yeah.
all those valuable skills
Mm-hmm.
and leadership experience they bring to the table.
That's great. It shows a commitment to diversity and inclusion.
Right. Which was becoming a really important topic in the tech industry back then.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of insights, remember that bonus source we mentioned earlier?
One with the discussion questions?
Yeah, the discussion question. Well, one of the questions that really stood out to me was,
Okay.
how did Jeff Bezos reinforce Amazon's commitment to long-term thinking in this letter?
That's a good question.
It is, right. And it's interesting how it's woven throughout the entire letter.
You're right. Yeah.
He constantly talks about the importance of making decisions based on long-term value.
Yeah.
Even if it means sacrificing some short-term profits.
Mm-hmm.
He's all about patience,
Right. Yeah.
experimentation,
Right.
learning from mistakes.
It's a long game.
It's a long game, exactly. And he keeps repeating this phrase.
Oh, yeah.
It's still day one.
Day one.
He even includes a copy of his original 1997 shareholder letter
Oh, wow.
with every new one,
That's cool.
just to remind people of the core principles that have guided Amazon from the very beginning.
That's a powerful reminder to stay true to your roots as your company grows.
Right.
It's easy to lose sight of those fundamentals
Uh-huh.
when you're dealing with so much hype and change.
Right.
But Bezos clearly understands the value of staying grounded in those core values.
And speaking of those core values, let's take a quick look at that 1997 letter.
All right?
It's incredible how much of what he laid out back then is still relevant today.
Yeah, it's like a blueprint for success.
He talks about being customer obsessed,
Mm,
taking bold bets,
Right, yeah.
embracing the long view,
even when Wall Street doesn't get it.
even when Wall Street doesn't get it. It's all about creating value for customers,
Yeah.
taking calculated risks,
Mm,
and always learning and iterating.
it's a timeless approach.
It is. He also talked about fostering a culture of innovation.
Okay.
empowering employees to think big and
Right.
take ownership.
It's about building a company where everyone feels
Yeah.
invested in the long-term success.
He even mentions prioritizing hiring versatile and talented employees
Mm-hmm.
and structuring compensation to heavily favor stock options over cash.
Aligning incentives, creating a sense of ownership.
Exactly. It's amazing to see how these principles have stood the test of time.
Absolutely. But here's a question.
Yeah.
In that 2013 letter, Bezos keeps saying it's still day one,
Right.
but at that point, Amazon was already this massive company.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is it really possible
Uh-huh.
to maintain that day one energy and
Got
that
it.
mentality when you're already that big and successful?
It's a really intriguing question.
It is.
And it leads perfectly into another question from that bonus source.
Oh, let's hear it. Yeah, it makes you wonder, can a company that big, even with all its incredible growth, truly maintain that day one hunger?
It's a question worth exploring, and one of the discussion points that this bonus source suggested was,
Okay.
if Bezos were writing the 2013 letter today, what do you think he would change or add?
Ooh.
It's kind of a fun thought experiment, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, we could speculate about all sorts of things, like his take on the pandemic e-commerce boom or,
Yeah.
the increased scrutiny on Amazon's market power.
Right, or even like the metaverse and all that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack
A
there.
lot to unpack. But what I find most fascinating is, whether that day one philosophy would still be front and center.
Right.
Can a company with Amazon's scale and influence genuinely stay that experimental and that relentless in its pursuit of growth?
It's a good question. It seems like there's a natural tension there, between that entrepreneurial spirit and the reality of managing this huge corporation.
Right.
I mean, there are more stakeholders to consider now, more
Mhm.
regulations to navigate,
Right.
and the stakes are a lot higher when it comes to taking risks.
So is day one just a catchy slogan at this point?
I don't think so.
Or is there more to it?
I think it's more than a slogan.
Yeah.
It represents a mindset, a
Okay.
way of approaching challenges and opportunities. It's about staying curious, embracing continuous learning and adaptation,
Okay.
and never taking your success for granted.
So maybe it's about recognizing that even a company as powerful as Amazon still has room to learn and grow.
Exactly. The world's constantly changing,
Right.
and the companies that thrive are the ones that anticipate and adapt to those changes. They stay hungry, they stay curious, and they never stop innovating.
Well, there you have it. Amazon in 2013 was this whirlwind of invention and expansion, driven by this unwavering focus on the customer and a commitment to long-term thinking.
Absolutely.
But the real question is, what does day one mean for Amazon today?
Right.
And even more importantly, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, what are your day one goals and ambitions?
Right.
What steps are you taking to stay curious, to stay hungry,
Yeah.
and to push your own boundaries?
Yeah, it really makes you think, like how can you apply that kind of day one energy to your own life, your own work?
It is a challenge, isn't it?
Are you-
To maintain that fresh perspective, that drive to constantly learn, to improve, whether you're a person or a giant corporation.
Speaking of learning, I think this whole deep dive has been a really good reminder of how much insight you can gain
Right.
from looking back at these moments in a company's history.
It's like you're doing an archaeological dig almost, uncovering the layers,
Yeah.
the decisions and strategies that got them to where they are today.
And what's so striking about that 2013 letter is how many of those early bets that Bezos made, like Prime, like AWS,
Yeah.
have become such a huge part of Amazon's success today.
It's true. And, it really shows the power of having that clear vision, being willing to experiment, and maybe most importantly, having the patience to let those initiatives play out over the long term.
It's a lesson that applies to so much more than just business, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about how you approach everything in life
Mhm.
with that same curiosity, that same drive to create value and make a difference.
And to never lose sight of the fact that it's always day one.
Right.
There's always more to learn. There's always something new to build. There's always something new to achieve.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Amazon's world back in 2013, we really encourage you to go check out Bezos's letters for yourselves.
Yeah, they're fascinating reads.
Oh, they are. You'll find the links in the show notes, of course.
Definitely worth a look.
They offer just an incredible glimpse into the mind of this visionary leader and some really timeless lessons on innovation, customer obsession, long-term thinking.
Yeah, and as you dive into those letters, think about how you can apply those principles to your own journey. What are
Okay.
your day one goals?
Yeah.
What are you doing to stay hungry, to stay curious,
Mm.
and to never stop pushing the boundaries of what's possible?
We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, definitely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.